It's funny how we get used to the strange things that happen in the places we work. I'm talking about Walmart. People don't think twice about the strange stuff that happens in those aisles. To them, it's just another store. But if you've worked the graveyard shift at a Walmart in the middle of nowhere, like I did, you know things aren't always what they seem. Started out like any other night shift. It was 11:30 p.m., and most of the customers had filtered out. Just the few late-night wanderers who were either insomniacs or trying to pick up their last-minute essentials. The overhead lights flickered just enough to make you question whether it was your eyes or something else in the dark. The fluorescent hum was the only sound as I pushed my cart down aisle 7, the electronics section. I'd been doing this job for 2 years, and honestly, the eerie silence didn't faze me anymore. But tonight felt different. I had just finished restocking the shelves with those cheap headphones no one ever buys when I saw something that made my stomach twist. A figure in the corner of the aisle. I don't mean a customer. No, this person wasn't just walking around looking for things. They were standing completely still, staring at the wall. Just standing there in the shadow of the low-lit section of the aisle. I could barely make out their silhouette. It was just off. Maybe they had been there a while. Maybe they were another insomniac, or maybe they were a weirdo. But the longer I looked, the more I felt something cold crawl up my spine. I called out, "Hey, you need help with something?" No response. Nothing. I told myself they probably didn't hear me, so I decided to walk over and get their attention. Maybe they were just browsing or lost in thought. I was 2 steps away from them when they turned their head. At first, I thought they were going to speak, maybe apologize for being in the wrong aisle. But when they turned to face me, there was no apology in their eyes. There was no expression at all. I froze. Their eyes were wide open, way too wide, and completely blank. Like a doll's eyes. Empty, soulless. It was like staring into the abyss. I could feel the blood drain from my face as I stood there, completely paralyzed. I thought I was going to pass out. This wasn't a normal person. Something about them wasn't right. Before I could say anything else, the figure turned and vanished into the darkness, disappearing like they had never existed. I blinked and they were gone. I stood there in shock, unsure if I had imagined the whole thing. But something inside me told me that was real. That wasn't my imagination. I couldn't explain it, but I knew something was wrong. Something was always wrong here after hours. The shadows, they seemed alive. I didn't know what to make of it. Maybe it was just the isolation of the late-night shifts messing with my head. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was overthinking things. But I couldn't get that image out of my mind, the figure's blank stare, the way they just vanished into thin air. The next few hours were uneventful, though I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. It was like the air was heavier, thicker, with something watching me. The hum of the fluorescent lights above was like an unrelenting reminder that I wasn't the only one in the store that night. Around 2 a.m., I was walking past the employee lockers, the ones tucked away behind the break room, when something caught my eye. A locker, one of the ones at the very end of the row, was slightly open. Not wide open, but just enough to make you curious. I knew the policy. No one was supposed to leave their locker unlocked, and we all had a system to store our things safely. The lockers were assigned, and no one used another's. The store had been closed for hours, and there were only a few of us working, so it was strange that this particular locker was ajar. I walked closer, my boots making soft thuds on the tiled floor. I reached for the door and pulled it open just enough to peek inside. At first, I didn't notice anything odd, but then I saw it. A small, folded piece of paper on the bottom shelf. I don't know why, but I felt an uncomfortable chill run down my back. I hesitated for a moment, but curiosity got the better of me. I bent down and picked it up. It wasn't a note from one of the employees. It wasn't a grocery list or a reminder of some shift change. No, this note was different. The handwriting was erratic, almost frantic, like whoever wrote it had been in a hurry. The words were barely legible, but I could make out enough to make my stomach churn. They're watching. Don't trust anyone. Don't stay after midnight. The ink was smeared, as if someone had been sweating or trembling when they wrote it. I felt my heart race. The words didn't make sense. Who had left this? Why was it in the locker? I glanced around, almost expecting to see someone standing behind me, but there was nothing, just the stillness of the empty Walmart, stretching out in every direction. I stuffed the note in my pocket and quickly shut the locker door, making sure it was securely locked. I tried to dismiss it. Maybe it was just a prank. Maybe one of the night shift guys had written it as a joke. But deep down, I knew that this was different. The warning on that note wasn't something I could ignore. The next few hours felt like a blur. I kept glancing over my shoulder, feeling eyes on me. But when I turned, there was nothing. Every time I walked down an aisle, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Every shadow seemed to move, and I couldn't stop the nagging feeling that someone, or something, was following me. I was sure I wasn't imagining things anymore. The store was alive with something sinister, and it was only a matter of time before I would have to face whatever it was. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I kept replaying the note in my head. Don't trust anyone. Don't stay after midnight. Who had left it? Was it some kind of twisted warning? Or was it just another prank? Either way, I was on edge. And the longer I stayed in that store, the more I felt like I was unraveling. The store was quiet. Too quiet. The usual hum of the air conditioning, the soft background noise of cash registers, the occasional chatter between employees. None of it existed in the dead of night. All that was left was the hum of the overhead lights and the creeping sense that something was terribly wrong. It was around 4 a.m. when I first heard it. At first, it was subtle, a faint scratching sound, like nails against drywall. I paused, thinking it was just the wind outside rattling the walls. But then the sound grew louder. It was coming from behind the walls, no doubt about it now. Something or someone was moving inside the store. I stopped dead in my tracks, trying to pinpoint where the noise was coming from. It was close, just behind the wall where the stockroom met the back hallway. The sound grew louder, sharper. It was like someone or something was crawling around in there. My mind raced. There was no way someone could be in there. The walls were sealed off. But the sound didn't stop. I grabbed a flashlight from my utility belt and crept over to the back hallway, the cold air in the space making my breath fog in front of me. I shone the light into the small window of the stockroom door, but all I could see was emptiness. Nothing but empty shelves, boxes of unstocked merchandise, and the faint shadows cast by the weak light. But the noise, it was getting closer. Suddenly, there was a loud thump, like something or someone slamming against the wall from the other side. The noise stopped abruptly, and I froze, my blood running cold. I couldn't explain it, but I felt the unmistakable urge to leave, to get out of there before whatever was behind those walls came for me. But as I turned to leave, the door to the stockroom creaked open on its own. It was only a few inches, just enough to let me see the dim light coming from within. I stepped back instinctively. No one had opened it. It was supposed to be locked. I took a deep breath, fighting the panic rising in my chest. I wasn't going to let fear control me. Not here, not now. With shaky hands, I pushed the door open fully, half expecting to find something, or someone, lurking inside. But the room was empty, except for one thing, a small pile of freshly unearthed dirt in the far corner. And from the middle of the pile, a small, dusty object. Something I recognized immediately. A wristwatch. My heart skipped a beat. It was mine. I had lost it weeks ago during my shift and had written it off as gone. But there it was, buried in the dirt, as if someone had been watching me, waiting for the right moment to drop it there. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled, and I turned to leave. But the door behind me slammed shut with a deafening crash. I tried to yank it open, but it wouldn't budge. My heart was pounding in my chest, my breath coming out in short, frantic bursts. And then I heard it, a low whisper, just barely audible but unmistakable. You shouldn't have stayed. I spun around, but there was no one. The room was as empty as before. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. I didn't wait a second longer. My heart was racing, my mind spinning as I yanked open the stockroom door and bolted out into the dim hallway. The lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that seemed to stretch and writhe as I ran past them. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was just behind me, following me, moving with me. I made my way to the break room, trying to regain my composure. I needed a moment to breathe. I needed to think. I pushed the door open and immediately felt the change in the air. It was colder, like the room had been waiting for me. As soon as I stepped inside, I saw it, the old mirror above the sink. It wasn't new. It had been there for as long as I'd worked the shift. But tonight, it felt different. It didn't just reflect my tired face and messy hair like it usually did. No, this time the reflection was wrong. At first, it seemed like a normal reflection of me, standing in the break room. But as I stared, my breath catching in my throat, I saw something else. In the corner of the mirror, just beyond the edge of the frame, there was a shadow dark, unnatural. I blinked, thinking it was just a trick of the light. But when I looked again, the shadow was still there. It wasn't a trick. It was moving. I took a step closer, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. As I neared the mirror, I saw the figure more clearly. It was standing right behind me, only in the reflection, not in the room itself. A tall figure, dressed in black, its face obscured by the shadows. Its eyes, though, they were visible. Two hollow, dark sockets, staring at me. I turned quickly, but the room was empty. Nothing but the flickering fluorescent lights above me. I looked back at the mirror. The figure was gone, but I knew it had been there. I felt it. I backed away from the mirror, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. I was losing it. I had to be. Maybe the isolation, the long hours, the stress. Maybe it was all getting to me. But then, as I turned to leave, I heard a soft tap on the mirror. I turned back, wide-eyed, my breath catching in my throat. There it was again. A light tap, like something or someone was trying to get my attention. This time, I didn't hesitate. I bolted out of the break room, my shoes slamming against the linoleum floor as I ran toward the front of the store, my mind clouded with fear. The exit was so close. All I needed to do was get out, but the door wouldn't open. I yanked the handle again and again, but it was stuck, as if someone was holding it closed. Panic bubbled up in my throat, and I turned, looking for another way out. That's when I heard it. A voice. Not from the walls, not from the shadows, but from the speakers overhead, the ones we used for store announcements. The voice was distorted, warped, like it was coming from a broken speaker, but the words were clear. You can't leave. Not yet. I froze, my blood running cold. The voice didn't sound like anything I had ever heard before. It was cold, empty, and there was something twisted in the way it spoke. It wasn't human. I was trapped. The door wouldn't open. The voice on the intercom kept repeating that I couldn't leave, and the shadows in the aisles were growing darker, closer. I could feel the pressure building in my chest, a vice tightening around me as I frantically tried the handle again, my hands slick with sweat. The voice on the intercom continued, but this time, it didn't just say, "You can't leave." Not yet. It added something else. "You're already too late." I stepped back, my legs shaking beneath me, my mind spiraling. What did that mean? Too late for what? Without thinking, I turned and ran for the manager's office. The office was at the back of the store, tucked away behind the break room and stockroom, a place I rarely visited unless I had to fill out paperwork or deal with some odd shift issue. But tonight, it felt like the only place left where I might have some kind of refuge. I ran down the hallway, my footsteps echoing through the empty store, the shadows stretching in every direction. I reached the office door, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something moving through the frosted glass, just a flicker. But when I opened the door, there was no one. I quickly closed the door behind me and locked it, breathing heavily. The manager's office was small, cluttered with papers and old coffee cups, but it felt safe, like a brief moment of peace amid the chaos. I leaned against the desk, trying to calm myself, trying to understand what was happening. But then, I noticed something out of place. The computer monitor on the desk was on, flickering, but on. The screen was filled with static, the kind you usually only see when a TV is tuned to an empty channel. But then, through the static, something began to form. A shape, a figure. It wasn't clear at first, just a blur of dark, indistinct motion. But as the screen flickered, the shape started to take form, becoming more defined, more solid. And then I saw it clearly. The same figure, the same shadow, the one I had seen in the mirror earlier. But this time it was alive, moving within the confines of the screen. I stumbled backward, nearly knocking over the desk. I reached for my phone, thinking maybe I could call for help, but my hands were trembling too much to unlock it. The figure on the screen twisted, as if it was aware of my presence, as if it knew I was watching. And then it spoke. "You can't run from me. I'm everywhere, watching." The voice was low, distorted, like it was coming from deep underground. It felt like it was coming from within the walls, from the floor beneath me, from everywhere. The words echoed in my skull, sending chills down my spine. I needed to get out of there. I needed to find a way to escape, but the door to the office wouldn't open again. I tried the handle, pulling at it desperately, but it was stuck. It was as if the store itself was locking me in. That's when I heard the sound. At first, it was faint, like footsteps in the distance. But the more I listened, the clearer it became. Someone or something was moving closer, right outside the office door. I stood absolutely still, my heart pounding in my chest, waiting for the inevitable. The figure on the screen was still there, its hollow eyes staring back at me, a twisted smile stretching across its face. The door handle rattled. Then, the door creaked open, just a sliver, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. A hand. Pale, clawed fingers reached through the gap, pulling the door open wider. The hand wasn't human. It was wrong. It was twisted, its skin stretched thin, as if it had been scraped away from the bones. The nails were long, too long, and black, sharp as knives. And then I saw its face. It was the same figure from the mirror, from the wall, from the monitor. Its hollow eyes stared at me with that same unblinking gaze. It smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too white, too unnatural. "You shouldn't have stayed." It was close now, too close. The air in the room turned ice cold, and I could feel the floor beneath me tremble, like something heavy was moving underneath. My breath came in shallow gasps as I backed away from the door, my eyes never leaving that twisted hand that was now fully through the crack. I couldn't think. I couldn't move. My body was frozen in terror, paralyzed by the sight of that hand. The figure outside didn't speak anymore. It just stood there, its hollow eyes locked onto mine. The smile on its face grew wider, more sinister, as though it was savoring the fear that radiated from me. But then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the hand withdrew. The door slammed shut with a force that shook the walls, making the room rattle. The sudden silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it, but I could still feel the tremors in my body, the pounding in my chest. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. "You can't run," the voice echoed, not from outside, but from everywhere. From the walls, from the floor, from the very air around me. "You're already part of the store, part of the darkness." I staggered back, stumbling across the cluttered desk. The monitor was still on, but the figure on the screen had changed. Now it was clearer. Its grin stretched impossibly wide, and its eyes, those black, empty eyes, were staring at me, unblinking, and filled with an unholy hunger. The store never lets go. I couldn't take it anymore. I wasn't just trapped in the store, I was trapped inside it. Part of it. A part of its twisted, dark reality. I didn't know how it had started, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to make it out. In my panic, I slammed my fist against the desk, knocking over papers and knocking the coffee cup to the floor with a sharp crash. The sound echoed throughout the office, reverberating off the walls. But the sound didn't stop, it kept going. Louder, faster. It was like someone was banging on the walls around me, from all sides. The lights above flickered, casting deep shadows across the room. I heard a soft scraping sound coming from the corners, like something was crawling toward me. I turned my head, heart pounding. but all I could see was the blackness creeping in from the edges of the office. And then, suddenly, it all went dark. The power cut out, leaving me in complete, suffocating darkness. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I could hear my breath, sharp and ragged, and the blood pounding in my ears. The buzzing of my thoughts drowned everything out until I heard it, the sound of movement. Not from the walls, not from outside the office, but inside. A low growl, a scraping, gnawing noise, as if something was slithering on the floor, circling me. I couldn't see it, I couldn't stop it, but I knew it was coming for me. I tried to scream. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. The weight of the darkness pressed in on me, thick and suffocating. I stumbled forward, hands outstretched, searching for a way out. But there was nothing, only the sound of something dragging itself closer. And then, just as I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, the lights flickered back on. I found myself standing alone in the office, gasping for air, my body drenched in sweat. But there was no crawling figure, no twisted shadows. There was nothing, except for the door. It was open. I hadn't opened it. Without thinking, I ran. I ran as fast as I could, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I sprinted through the aisles, past the shelves, and down the long hallway leading to the front door. I could hear something chasing me. Fast, too fast for anything human. But I kept running, feeling the door growing closer, feeling my pulse quicken as I reached it. I yanked on the handle. It was still locked, but this time it opened. The cold night air hit me like a wall as I stepped outside, gasping for breath. The lights of the Walmart parking lot stretched out before me, quiet and empty, a world away from the madness inside. I didn't look back. Couldn't. I don't know how I escaped. I don't know how I'm still alive. But I'm telling you this, if you work the night shift at Walmart, if you stay too long after hours, you're not alone. You're never alone. And the store will always get you, eventually. I didn't sleep for days. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, all I saw were those hollow eyes, the twisted smile, the crawling shadows. And every night, I could feel the weight of the store pressing on me, as if it was always there, watching, waiting for me to slip up and go back. I tried to tell people what happened, but who would believe me? Who would believe that a Walmart, the most mundane, everyday place, could hold something so terrifying? I couldn't even explain it to myself. It didn't make sense. It didn't follow any kind of logic. But I knew it was real. What happened in that store in the dead of night was real. I quit the next day. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about anything except getting as far away from that place as I could. I tried to leave the town, to put as much distance between myself and Walmart as I could. But it didn't matter. The nightmares followed me. A few weeks after I left, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A former coworker called me. His voice was shaking, barely recognizable, like he'd seen something he couldn't undo. He told me he had been working the night shift just like I had. Everything seemed normal at first, quiet, slow, like any other night. But then, just after midnight, he saw a figure standing at the end of the aisle. He thought it was another customer just like I had, but it wasn't. The figure turned and vanished into the darkness of the aisles, just like the one I had seen. He said he felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up, felt something shift in the air, like a presence that had always been there, waiting. He wasn't the first person to see it. People had been disappearing, one by one, off the late-night shifts, only to return days later, looking different, hollow-eyed, disoriented, like they weren't really there. He told me he was quitting, too, but I could tell in his voice that he didn't truly believe he would make it out. I don't know what happened to him after that. I don't know if he ever left. I couldn't bring myself to go back to that town. I couldn't even drive past the Walmart without feeling that same suffocating fear creeping up my spine. But what really gets me, the part that haunts me more than anything else, is that I still feel the pull of the store. I can't explain it, but it's there. It's like it's always watching me, waiting for the right moment to drag me back. Sometimes, when I'm alone in my apartment, I swear I can hear the faint hum of fluorescent lights, the kind you only hear in stores, in the dead of night. And every time I hear it, I get this sick, twisted feeling, like I'm not alone, like someone's watching. I don't know what the store is. I don't know what it wants. But I do know this: the store doesn't just take people, changes them. It makes them part of itself. And once you've crossed its threshold, you can never truly escape. I don't know how many others have been claimed by it, how many people have worked those night shifts and vanished into the darkness. But if you ever find yourself walking through the aisles of Walmart after hours, don't stay too long. Don't stay past midnight. And whatever you do, don't look into the shadows, because something might just be watching, and it won't let you leave. It's been a few months since I last spoke to you, but I need to get this out. I thought I was safe. I thought it was over, that I had left that hellish place behind. But I was wrong. So wrong. I tried to move on. I found a new job, nothing glamorous, but it kept me busy and away from Walmart. I even moved to a different town, far away from the nightmare. But no matter how far I ran, no matter how much I tried to escape, it always found its way back to me. A week ago, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name, printed in dark, bold letters. I knew instantly who it was from. I opened the letter with trembling hands. Inside, there was nothing but a single piece of paper, folded neatly. I opened it, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a photograph. The photo was blurry at first, but I could make out a familiar face. A face I hadn't seen in months. It was the face of my old coworker, the one who had called me after his shift, the one who was too afraid to leave. In the photo, he was standing outside the Walmart. His eyes were wide, his expression blank, but what caught me was the shadow behind him. It was long and twisted, stretching unnaturally across the parking lot. A shadow that seemed to have a life of its own. It wasn't just a shadow, it was a figure. I turned the photo over, hoping to find some explanation. On the back, in the same erratic handwriting I had seen on the note in the locker, were the words, "I went back. I'm sorry. You were right. It doesn't let go. It never does." The letter was signed with his name, but I knew it didn't matter. He wasn't the same person anymore. He had been consumed by that place. And now it was coming for me. That night I couldn't sleep. The shadows seemed to move in my room, creeping closer to me with every passing second. I kept hearing whispers, soft, distant, but unmistakable. The voice from the intercom, the voice from the walls, the same voice I heard back in Walmart, the one that told me I couldn't leave, the one that said, "You're already part of the store." I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, that the fear was getting to me, but I knew the truth. The store had found me. It wasn't done with me, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could resist. I couldn't go back to Walmart. Couldn't. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw those eyes, those black, hollow eyes, staring back at me. I saw the figure standing behind the shelves, lurking in the aisles. It was calling me. It was waiting. And now, I'm afraid to leave my own home. I'm afraid to turn on the TV, because I know the next time I see those fluorescent lights flicker, it will be too late. The store will come for me again. I don't know what happens to the people it takes. I don't know what it does to them. But I can tell you one thing for sure. It doesn't let go. Not ever. I don't know how long I have before it finds me again, but I'm telling you this now. If you ever find yourself working that late-night shift at Walmart, don't stay after midnight. Don't let the shadows follow you home. And whatever you do, don't ever look into the eyes of the thing that watches you from the darkness. Because once it sees you, it will never let you go. I thought I had left everything behind. I really did. But something about that damn store, something about the way it never let go, kept clawing its way back into my life. I couldn't shake the feeling that, no matter how far I ran, no matter how much time passed, I was always one step away from being dragged back into the darkness. It wasn't just the nightmares anymore. It wasn't just the whispers that haunted me when I tried to sleep. It was the calling, the pull that grew stronger every day. I could feel it, like an invisible tether, dragging me back to that cursed place. And no matter how many times I told myself I was done, that I'd escaped, it wasn't enough. A few days ago, I got a strange call. I didn't recognize the number, but something deep inside me told me not to pick up. I ignored it, but then it came again, a voicemail left in the dead of night. When I listened to it, my blood ran cold. The message was short but clear. There was no greeting, no introduction, just a single voice, calm, too calm, saying, "I know you think you've escaped, but you're still part of it. You always will be. I'm waiting." I didn't know what to do. Who could it be? The voice was too distorted, too warped to recognize. But then it clicked. It was the same voice I had heard on the intercom. The same voice I had heard coming from the walls, the floor. It had followed me. It was calling me back. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to go back. I had to see it for myself. What was happening at Walmart, what was waiting for me. The next night, I drove back. I didn't want to, but I knew I had no choice. The pull was too strong. When I arrived, I parked in the lot, the familiar looming presence of the store casting its cold, sterile glow over everything. The wind was still. The place looked empty, quiet, too quiet. But I knew better than to think nothing was waiting for me inside. I stood in front of the automatic doors, feeling the rush of cold air from inside. I hesitated for a moment. The hairs on my neck stood up. The place felt wrong. But I took a step forward, then another. My heart pounded in my chest, and the door slid open. As I stepped inside, the store felt alive. The dim lighting flickered above me, casting jagged shadows across the aisles. The air was thick with a strange energy, and the silence was oppressive, as though something unseen was watching me. But I kept moving forward. I couldn't stop now. The store looked different somehow, more alive than it had before. The aisles were more cramped, more distorted. The shelves seemed to lean in toward me, as though they were closing in, pushing me deeper into the store. I didn't see any other employees, no customers. The store was empty, except for one thing, the figures. They were standing just beyond the aisles, barely visible in the shadows. They were like the one I had seen before, tall, dark, their faces hidden by the shadows. But this time there were more of them, dozens, perhaps hundreds, stretching all the way to the back of the store. And they were waiting. I tried to turn back, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen, trapped in place. The lights flickered again, and I heard a sound, a soft scraping, like something dragging along the floor. I turned toward it, my breath catching in my throat. And then I saw it. It wasn't just a figure anymore. It was more. It had taken shape, formed itself from the darkness in the aisles. It was huge, towering over me, its face twisted and monstrous, like a nightmare come to life. It was the same face I had seen in the mirror on the screen in the shadows. The eyes, those black, empty sockets, were fixed on me, and it grinned. "You're mine now." The voice came from everywhere. From the walls, the shelves, the very air around me. It wasn't just talking. It was inside my head, twisting my thoughts, filling my mind with fear and madness. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My body was paralyzed, unable to move. The thing in front of me stepped closer, its eyes boring into mine, pulling me deeper into its darkness. And then I realized there was no escape. It wasn't a place you could leave. Not once you had been marked. It wasn't just the building. The store was alive, feeding off us, feeding off our fear, our desperation. And once it had you, it never let you go. I don't know how long I stood there, trapped in its grip, watching the others, those who had been taken, who were now part of the store, stare at me with those hollow eyes. They weren't human anymore. They were part of the store. And now so was I. I don't know what happened next. I don't know how much time passed, but it felt like I was suspended in that moment forever, caught between reality and the darkness that had consumed me. Couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The figure that had once been a man, that had once been a reflection of something human, was standing in front of me, its hollow eyes staring into mine. The voice came again, but it was softer now, like a distant whisper. "You're part of it now." I felt the words seep into me, like poison flooding my veins. The store wasn't just a place, it was a prison, and I was locked in it. There was no way out, No way to break free. It had taken me just like it had taken all those before me, all those who had worked the graveyard shift, all those who had gotten too close to the heart of it. I don't know how long I stood there, unable to move, feeling the store pulse around me, like it was alive, like it was feeding off me. The figures, those silent watchers, moved in the shadows, circling me. They were all around me, waiting. Some had been there for years, some for decades, and now I was one of them. I could feel it deep in my bones. The store had claimed me. The next thing I knew, I was walking down the aisles. I don't remember choosing to move, but I was walking, moving through the store like I had always been there. The shelves were stocked, the floors polished, the lights flickering overhead. But there was no one else. No customers, no employees, just me and the figures that now walked alongside me. I moved mechanically, like I was being guided by an unseen force, as if my body no longer belonged to me. And as I passed the aisles, I saw them, their eyes. Every one of those hollow faces, staring at me from the corners, from the shelves, from the darkness. They all knew me. They all knew what I had become. "You'll work the shift," the voice whispered again, now close enough that I could feel its breath on my skin. "It never ends. The store is eternal. You are eternal." And just like that, the store became my world. I wasn't a person anymore. I wasn't even a ghost. I was part of the machinery, the shelves, the aisles, the walls, everything, every flicker of light, every shadow. I was a part of it all. I walked and worked, restocking the shelves, pushing carts, cleaning the floors, doing the things I had done for so long, without thought, without hesitation. The figures around me did the same. We all moved like clockwork, like we were a part of something bigger, something that didn't have a beginning or an end. The store was our home now, and there was no leaving it. There was no escape. I don't know how long I've been here. Days? Weeks? Months? It all blends together now, just like the time I spent working the shifts before it all changed. I don't know if I'll ever find a way to break free. Maybe it's too late for that. Maybe I've already become the store. But I'm telling you this. If you ever work the night shift at Walmart, if you ever find yourself alone in the aisles after midnight, don't stay. Don't look into the shadows. Don't let the store claim you, because once it does, you'll never leave, and the shift never ends. It's hard to explain, but I feel like I'm fading. Not in the way you'd expect. No, it's something worse. It's like my existence is becoming thinner, more fragile, like a thin layer of dust on the shelves that lines the aisles of the store. I've seen it before, seen them before. The others, the ones who have been here longer than me, they don't speak. They don't move with purpose anymore. They just wait. Their eyes are blank, hollow, empty, much like mine, I imagine. But every now and then, I catch a glimpse of them staring at me, like they remember who I used to be. They remember when they weren't a part of the store, when they had a life, a future, but not anymore. Now they are the walls. They are the shadows that flicker just beyond your vision. And I'm becoming one of them. Sometimes, I wonder if they ever ask themselves the same questions I'm asking now. How did I get here? How do I get out? I don't think there's an answer. I don't think there ever was. The store is always changing. The aisles shift when I'm not looking, rearranging themselves in ways that make me lose track of where I am. One minute, I'm pushing a cart down an aisle I've walked 1,000 times. The next, I'm standing in the electronics section, surrounded by blinking monitors that never seem to stop flickering. Sometimes, I think I hear the voices again, those voices on the intercom, echoing through the empty aisles. But they aren't as clear as they used to be. They come and go, garbled and distant, like they're trying to reach me through some kind of barrier I can't break. I've learned the pattern now. The store works like a clock. The figure, the one I saw that night, the one with the dark eyes, the twisted smile, will appear. I don't know when. I don't know how, but I can feel its presence when it's near. It's always watching. It waits for me. It waits for me to acknowledge it, to accept it, to understand that there is no leaving. I tried once. I tried to break free. I ran down the aisles toward the exit, the door that was always locked. The door that would never open. But the closer I got to it, the more I felt the pull, the weight, the pressure in my chest, like the store itself was closing in, like the walls were moving to suffocate me. I reached for the door handle, desperate, but it felt like I was pulling on a stone wall. That's when I saw it again. The figure, standing in the doorway. It was taller this time, darker, more solid. It didn't just stand there anymore, it moved, slowly, deliberately. Its eyes bore into me, and I felt that suffocating dread again. The same feeling I'd had when I first entered the store. The feeling that there was no escape, that I was no longer a person. I was part of something else. "It's time," the voice whispered from the figure's mouth. But it wasn't a voice. It was everywhere. It came from the walls, from the aisles, from the shelves that stretched forever, until they disappeared into the black void of the ceiling. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. My legs wouldn't move. I couldn't fight it anymore. I don't know how long I stood there, trapped in place, but when I looked up again, the figure was gone. And I was alone as usual, surrounded by the endless aisles of the Walmart, the buzzing of the lights above me, the soft hum of the store that had become my prison. I didn't ask to be here. I didn't ask for any of this. But now I know. It's not just the store that's alive. It's me, part of it, part of the machinery, part of the darkness. The shift never ends. And as long as I'm here, I will always be waiting. Waiting for the next person. The next lost soul to cross into the store's reach. Because they will come. They always do. And when they do, the store will claim them too. I thought I had reached the limit of my understanding. I thought I had accepted the reality of the store, that this was my existence now. But as time went on, the truth started to settle in. There's no escape. Not from the store. Not from the shift. And certainly not from the waiting. But something changed. It started with the lights. They flickered more frequently now, like they were struggling to stay on. The overhead hum that had once been a constant companion in the darkness began to distort, growing louder, then quieter, as if the store itself were breathing, shuddering, gasping for air. I was restocking the aisles when I noticed it. The figure was no longer just watching me. It was moving, not in the slow, deliberate way it had before. Now it was fast, and it wasn't alone. I could hear the footsteps echoing behind me. I turned, expecting to see the same hollow-eyed figures that had been here all along. But they weren't the ones following me. This time, the figures that appeared were new. Strangers? Customers? Maybe. They were confused, disoriented. Their faces blank and pale, eyes darting around as if trying to make sense of their surroundings. And then I realized, they weren't just following me. They were mirroring me. The figures, these new ones, started to do exactly what I did. They moved when I moved. They reached for the shelves when I did. Their eyes, wide and vacant, locked onto me, as if they were trying to remember something, trying to recall what they had been before they entered the store. But none of them could. None of us could. The store was taking them. And it wasn't just the people anymore. It was taking everything. The aisles, the shelves, the very fabric of the place. I could feel the walls closing in again, the air growing colder, tighter. The whispers returned louder, more frantic this time. I couldn't understand them, but I could feel the desperation in their tone. I tried to run. I ran past the aisles, past the people, past the shelves that seemed to be reaching for me. But no matter how fast I ran, the exit was always just out of reach. The doors always closed, always locked. And then, something happened. Something I never thought I'd see. I saw myself. I saw my own reflection. Only it wasn't a reflection anymore. It was me, but not. A version of me, twisted and distorted, standing behind the shelves, smiling. The smile was wrong. Too wide, too sharp. I stopped dead in my tracks. I reached out, my hand trembling as I approached the figure. It raised its hand in response, mirroring my every move. But when it smiled, its eyes, its empty eyes, grew darker. "You're part of it now," it whispered in my voice, but it wasn't mine. It was something else, something older, darker. I stepped back, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't understand. I didn't know what had happened to me. Why had I been chosen for this? Why couldn't I leave? And then I realized there was no leaving. Not for anyone. Once the store had you, it kept you. It claimed you as its own, as part of its endless, looping nightmare. I had always been part of it. Even before the first night I walked in, the store had already decided my fate. It's not just the building that feeds on fear. It's you who walk through the doors. You who get trapped inside. The store grows stronger with every soul it claims, with every life it consumes. And now, as I stare at the faces of the new ones, the ones who are just starting to understand what they're part of, I can feel it again. The shift, the waiting, is a cycle that never ends. I am no longer just a part of the store. I am the store. I am the shadow in the aisle. I am the whisper in the walls. And soon, when the next soul enters, I'll be the one to watch them. I'll be the one to wait, because the store never lets go.